Here's a number that should rearrange how you think about everything. 600,000. That's the number of Americans currently living without reliable electricity, without consistent food access, without running water, and without any institutional safety net. Not preparing for those conditions, living in them. Right now, in your city. We spent the last video mapping which American cities become death traps when the trucks stop rolling. Today, the question is different. Who already knows how to survive after the trucks are gone for good? The answer isn't a Navy SEAL. It isn't a homesteader in Montana. It's the people most preppers walk past without a second look. They have been running an infrastructure-free operating system for years. While you've been planning, they've been doing. The specific techniques they've developed, 10 of them, translate directly to WW3 urban collapse conditions. No gear required, no property required. Just knowledge. Let's get into it. Most people who call themselves preppers have never spent a single night without electricity. Not one. They've bought the gear. They've built the spreadsheets. They've run the calculations on water filtration rates and caloric reserves and radio frequencies. What they have never done is actually operate inside the conditions they claim to be preparing for. That's not preparation. That's expensive rehearsal with no performance date. Here's the distinction that actually matters. WW3 collapse is not a wilderness problem. It is an urban infrastructure problem. That single reframe determines which skill set keeps you alive and which one is a comfortable story you've been constructing, one gear purchase at a time. Think about the sequence. The grid fails. When the grid fails, the fuel supply chain fractures. When the fuel chain fractures, the trucks stop rolling. When the trucks stop, every grocery shelf in your metro area empties in 72 hours. After that, the institutional systems most people never think about, emergency services, hospitals, police response, sanitation, begin degrading within days, not weeks. You are now operating inside conditions that have nothing to do with a cabin in the woods and everything to do with keeping a human body functional inside a hostile urban environment with zero institutional support. Those conditions are not a scenario. They are what 600,000 Americans are living in right now, every day, without a scheduled end date. That last detail is where most prepper training breaks down entirely. The 72-hour kit assumes a recovery horizon, a point where the crisis ends and institutions come back online. The 2-week supply assumes the same. Even a 90-day stockpile assumes a return to something resembling normal. WW3 doesn't come with that assumption. It comes with sustained, indefinite, infrastructure-free conditions. That requires a completely different operating framework than anything most preparedness culture has ever seriously addressed. We looked at this through 3 layers. Physical. How to maintain your body when no system is doing it for you. Logistical. How to acquire resources when no supply chain is delivering them. Social and psychological. How to read threats accurately and build functional community when no institution is enforcing order. Every one of the 10 techniques maps directly onto one of those 3 layers. And the people who have spent years pressure testing them, not on weekend drills but in actual daily sustained conditions, are already in your city. They've been there the whole time. The human body starts losing critical function at 95 degrees Fahrenheit core temperature. That's hypothermia. You don't need a blizzard to get there. You need wet clothes, wind, and a few hours. Most people in a WW3 urban collapse scenario won't die from violence in the first week. They'll die from exposure, dehydration, or caloric deficit. 3 conditions that have engineering solutions, if you know what you're doing. Technique 1 is thermal management, not buying a $400 sleeping bag, understanding the physics of insulation. The homeless discovered, through necessity, that newspaper creates air columns between layers of clothing that functionally mimic the thermal properties of high-end synthetic insulation. Cardboard laid beneath a body eliminates ground conduction loss, which is responsible for more hypothermia deaths than wind chill exposure. In a grid-down urban environment, both materials are available in unlimited quantities within a 1-mile radius of almost anywhere in America. This isn't improvisation. It's applied physics with zero acquisition cost. Technique 2 is urban water sourcing. Every city contains water that flows without electricity and without treatment plants. Building fountains on gravity-fed systems, HVAC condensation lines, specific municipal infrastructure installed before modern pump dependence that keeps functioning when the grid is gone. The homeless maintain a ranked mental hierarchy of these sources: what to access first, what to use only when nothing better is available, and what looks like water but will kill you within 72 hours. In a WW3 grid-down scenario, that hierarchy is the difference between surviving the first week and not making it past day 3. Technique 3 is caloric triage. Not finding food. Optimizing calories acquired per unit of energy spent acquiring them. The homeless operate on a specific calculus: which food sources require the least exposure, the least movement, the most caloric yield per acquisition attempt. Bakery surplus cycles. Restaurant backdoor timing. Institutional food distribution schedules that run on independent organizational momentum rather than commercial supply chains. When the trucks stop rolling, these secondary food streams keep operating longer than anything you'll find behind the glass doors of a darkened grocery store. Knowing them before you need them is the entire advantage. None of these 3 techniques require any gear. None require a property outside the city. They require knowledge of how your urban environment actually functions at the infrastructure level. Knowledge that 600,000 Americans have already acquired and are running daily. Your city's grocery stores have 72 hours of food. Every prepper knows this statistic. What most preppers haven't calculated is what comes after those 72 hours, specifically which resource streams keep operating when commercial supply chains go dark. The homeless have been working in that post-72-hour environment for years. They know exactly what's still running. Technique 4 is institutional schedule intelligence. Churches, food banks, bakeries, restaurants. These organizations operate on predictable cycles that don't immediately collapse when commercial infrastructure does. A church that has been running a Wednesday food distribution for 20 years doesn't stop in week 1 of a crisis. It may be the only functioning food network in your area for the first month. The homeless map these cycles with precision: which organizations distribute on which days, which backdoor schedules involve surplus food, which institutional kitchens run on independent fuel sources. This is not charity dependency. This is resource mapping at the secondary supply level. When the primary supply chain fails, secondary streams become primary. The people who already know where those streams are reach them first. Technique 5 is urban fire and heat generation. Not starting a fire with a magnesium striker in a forest. Building and maintaining heat safely inside an urban environment using materials present in any city. The specific materials and the sequence in which you use them matter more than most people realize. Carbon monoxide is the leading cause of unintentional fire-related death in enclosed shelter scenarios. Not flames, not smoke, but invisible accumulation in improperly ventilated spaces. The homeless know which ventilation configurations prevent it. They also know which locations inside any urban area provide both fire safety and concealment simultaneously. That combination is harder to find than it sounds, and identifying it in advance is the difference between a sustainable heat source and a fatal one. Technique 6 is material repurposing hierarchy. Not all shelter materials perform equally, and in a resource-scarce environment, choosing the wrong one has real consequences. Emergency mylar performs best: reflective, lightweight, wind-resistant. Below it sits plastic sheeting, then tarpaulin, then cardboard, each with specific use cases and specific failure modes. The homeless build a mental map of where each material type exists within their operating range before they need it. In WW3 conditions, the person who already knows where the materials are moves faster and spends less energy than the person discovering the landscape for the first time under pressure. Physical survival buys time. Logistical intelligence is what you do with that time. But both of those layers depend entirely on navigating something that no gear list and no material map can fully solve: other people. Two types of people survive sustained resource scarcity: the ones who learn to read their environment accurately and adjust in real time, and the ones who don't. In a WW3 urban collapse, the most common cause of non-disease death in the first 90 days isn't starvation or exposure. It's a failure to correctly assess human threat before it becomes violence. The homeless have developed a near-clinical framework for this assessment. Not intuition, pattern recognition trained by years of consequence. Technique 7 is threat reading and spatial intelligence. Every urban environment broadcasts continuous information about who controls which space, how recently that control was contested, and which behavioral indicators precede escalation. The homeless track specific categories of signal: territorial markers that indicate who claims a resource or location, behavioral anomalies in crowds that precede violence, and environmental indicators: recent conflict debris, resource depletion patterns, changes in pedestrian behavior, that signal a deteriorating area before the deterioration becomes dangerous. In normal times, most people never learn to read these signals because the consequences of missing them are manageable. In WW3 conditions, missing them is not manageable. It is fatal. Technique 8 is trust economy construction. In a zero-institution environment, the mechanisms that normally enforce trust, contracts, courts, police presence, digital reputation systems, are gone. What replaces them is a different infrastructure, built on demonstrated reliability, reciprocal exchange, and information sharing. The homeless build this infrastructure continuously because they have no alternative. Reputation travels faster in resource-scarce communities than in any commercial environment. A single act of genuine reliability, sharing accurate information about a food source, warning someone about a territorial boundary, contributing a specific skill at the right moment, establishes trust credit that operates for months. This is the technique most preppers have never seriously considered, because most prepper culture is organized around individual and small group self-sufficiency. That orientation fails at the scale WW3 creates. Communities that trade survive. Communities that hoard collapse from within before any external threat reaches them. Every data point from every sustained resource scarcity scenario in modern history confirms the same pattern. The homeless know this because they live it. In a WW3 scenario, your neighbors are not just the people who happen to share a street with you. They are your greatest strategic asset or your most immediate threat. There is no category between those two. Every city has invisible architecture, territories, safe corridors, dead zones, resource clusters, threat gradients that shift by time of day, by week, by the movement of specific populations through specific spaces. Most people who live in cities have no idea this architecture exists. The homeless have mapped it in detail that most municipal emergency management agencies don't possess. That map is Technique 9. Territorial mapping is not wandering. It is systematic intelligence gathering organized into an operational framework. The specific categories: water sources ranked by reliability and safety, food sources ranked by cycle and yield, shelter clusters ranked by security and weather protection, threat actor territories including behavioral patterns and boundary indicators, and movement corridors. The specific routes through a city that allow efficient transit while minimizing exposure. In a WW3 urban collapse, the person who has pre-built this map can move through the city in the first 72 hours of active chaos with a precision that looks like calm from the outside. Everyone else is navigating blind in a landscape that is becoming hostile faster than they can process it. You can begin building this map now. Today, it requires no equipment. It requires walking your city with different eyes than you currently use. Technique 10 is the one nobody prepares for. Not because it's unknown, because practicing it requires genuine and sustained discomfort, and most preparedness culture is specifically designed to eliminate discomfort rather than build tolerance for it. Psychological endurance, the capacity to maintain accurate decision-making under sustained scarcity. Not for 72 hours, not for a long weekend, but for weeks and months without relief. The specific mechanics matter. Decision fatigue degrades threat assessment accuracy. Sustained caloric deficit accelerates decision fatigue. The combination produces exactly the judgment failures that lead to catastrophic outcomes at the worst possible moments. Taking unnecessary risks, misreading threat signals, abandoning a functional situation for a marginally better-looking alternative that turns out to be a trap. The homeless manage this daily. They've developed specific mental frameworks for it. Short horizon resource cycling, disciplined delay of gratification under scarcity, risk calibration routines that preserve accuracy even under exhaustion. You can know all 9 other techniques and fail here. That is not a caveat. That is the most important data point in this entire analysis. And the people who have already built that psychological infrastructure built it the only way it can be built. By doing it, repeatedly, under real conditions, long before WW3 gave anyone a reason to pay attention. Let's pause here. I know what some of you are doing right now. You're running through your bug-out bag in your head. 72-hour kit, water filtration straw, emergency Mylar blanket, fire starter, maybe a trauma kit, good gear. Real investment. Let's address it directly. A bug-out bag is not a survival strategy. It is a 72-hour bridge to a destination that may not exist when you arrive. The bug-out bag assumes a road you can drive. It assumes a property or location outside your city that is meaningfully better than where you are. It assumes you leave before the wave of everyone else who had the same idea. And in a major metro area, that wave is measured in millions of people. Same highway, same window, same plan. In WW3 urban collapse, the roads don't cooperate with that assumption. Neither does the fuel supply. Neither does the time gap between the moment conditions deteriorate and the moment those roads become impassable. Run the math. If 10% of a metropolitan population of 3 million attempts vehicle evacuation in the same 48-hour window, the highway system stops functioning as a transportation network. You are now attempting a 300-mile journey on foot, carrying 40 pounds, through a landscape where everyone around you is arriving at the same desperate calculation simultaneously. The homeless carry everything they own at all times. They cover more urban ground per day than most bug-out plans account for in a week. With less gear, a bug-out bag is a statement. I believe I can outrun the collapse. These 10 techniques are a different statement entirely. I believe I can outlast it. Those are not variations of the same strategy. Only one of them is built for what WW3 actually creates. 10 techniques, 3 layers, 1 operating system. That's the architecture. The physical techniques, thermal management, water sourcing, caloric triage, buy time. They keep your body functional when no institution is doing it for you. The logistical techniques, institutional scheduling, fire and heat generation, material mapping, sustain that function across weeks and months, rather than hours. The social and psychological techniques, threat reading, trust economy construction, territorial mapping, psychological endurance. Determine whether the first 2 layers matter at all. None of this requires gear. None of it requires a rural property, a bug-out destination, or a storage unit full of freeze-dried meals. It requires knowledge and practice, which means you can begin building this operating system tonight in your actual city with what you already have access to. Here's what that practice looks like before the crisis arrives. It looks like walking your city's water source infrastructure and building a physical mental map of what flows without electricity. It looks like identifying which organizations in your area operate on independent food distribution cycles. Not theoretically, but by going there and confirming it. It looks like spending one night using only urban materials for warmth, specifically to close the gap between what you think you can do and what you've actually done. It looks like building one genuine trust economy relationship with one neighbor, knowing their primary skill, letting them know yours. The people who survive sustained WW3 urban collapse are not the people with the most gear. Every piece of data we have from sustained resource scarcity scenarios, historical and contemporary, lands on the same conclusion. They are the people with the most practiced, most pressure-refined, most field-tested operating systems. 600,000 Americans are already running that operating system. You just learned what it contains. Here's what you actually do. Not eventually. Now. First, map your city's infrastructure-independent water sources this week. Not on a screen. In person. Walk to them. Know where they are physically, not theoretically. In a grid-down scenario, knowing the location of a gravity-fed water source within 1 mile of your home is worth more than any filtration straw you've purchased. Second, identify your nearest institutional food cycle organizations. Food banks, churches, bakeries, restaurants with regular surplus schedules. You're not going to use them today. You're building the map before you need it. By the time you need it, there will be no time left to build it. Third, run one night of deliberate thermal management using only materials available in your immediate urban environment. No camping gear, no synthetic insulation. Newspaper, cardboard, plastic sheeting. Whatever your city provides, this single exercise will break the gap between theoretical knowledge and physical experience faster than any amount of reading or planning. Fourth, build one trust economy relationship in your actual neighborhood. One person who knows your primary skill and whose primary skill you know. Communities don't form in a crisis. They activate. If you haven't built the relationship before the collapse, you are trying to build it at the worst possible time, under the worst possible conditions, with the lowest possible success rate. 3 principles hold all of this together. Knowledge, practice, people. These 3 things work together, or they don't work at all. A location without skills is just a different place to fail. Skills without community get you to day 30. Community built on knowledge and practice gets you to whatever comes after. 10 techniques. 3 layers. One operating system they've been running for years. You just learned